Hello, everyone out there, and welcome back to my channel. I hope everyone day is going well on today. Today is Friday, May the 5th. And so I'm going to go right into the message that God gave me on today. And today, the title of my message is How Bad Do You Want It? How bad do you want it? Because a lot of times we want the blessings of God, but we don't want to do what it takes to get them. Even though God blesses his people regularly on an everyday basis, but there are some blessings that are not going to come about until we take a step forward to do what he's called us to do. And so I just thought about how we just, you hear about the blessings, because I want God to pour out on us. We want God to pour out heavily on us from heaven. And then you want to be blessed going in and coming out, as it says in Deuteronomy, the 28th chapter and the 6th verse. But as I said, the thing is, God is not going to do the work that he's calling us to do on our part. We are to participate. We have to participate in the process of bringing these blessings unto our lives sometimes. And I'm not saying every time, but certain things are not going to come about until we step up and do what God has called us to do, which requires obedience on our part. So I thought about how in First Corinthians it talks about how we are laborers together with God. We labor together with God. And so that means we're doing some kind of work on our part. And so I thought about if you read back in the Old Testament, in the book of Joshua, before God began to bring his people into the promised land. Now, this is I'm talking about the second time, because he made the promise to the generation before, but that whole generation had to die out because they had no faith. They did not believe God was going to get them to where they need to be, because it was not. They thought God was just going to take them there, but he took them through a process, and they didn't want to go through that process. And so they complained and they murmured to the point where they were not allowed to go. And so they had to die out. And this came about after, when they was getting ready to go the first time. It talked about that in the book of Numbers, the 13th chapter, how he sent in 10 spies to spy out their inheritance. And once they got there, the 10 spies, they were intimidated because everything was big. It was a prosperous city. And the people were giants. It was giants back in that time. And so they looked at the size of them compared to their stature, and they looked at themselves as grasshoppers, meaning small. But they forgot it was God that told them to go in. So that means that God told them to go in, then God was going to go in with them. Because God had been with them up to that point and showed them over and over again that he was with them. And so the second time, when he gave them that second chance, because see, they got tired of going around that same mountain, because they basically was going around that same mountain for 40 years. And so I know they got tired of that, and they wanted to see something different. And then the fact that they had, I'm sure, heard of what God had promised them already. And so they got to the point where they was ready. They was ready. And the only two that came back with a good report was Caleb and Joshua. Because Caleb and Joshua said they was well able to do what God told them to do. Now, all of them heard the same word. But then none but two people believed out of all them people. It was look, they said over 1 million people, and only two of them made it in from that generation. That's kind of really sad. And so that's exactly what Joshua and And Caleb did. They end up taking their land, and they end up living in their inheritance. It took a long time for them to get there, but they finally made it there. And so it talks about later how, only thing they had to do was obey God's voice. That's what God wanted them to do. Because like I said, it talks about when they first was going into the cities was locked up. It was locked up. They said it was fortified cities, meaning nobody could get in there unless they opened the door. And so God showed me even in this, obey my voice. So after walking around there 7 times for 7 days, and then when they shouted, God blew the whole wall down, and they just went up into the city. Not only that, only did they overtake them, and really he was telling them to kill it. He was going to kill anything that was not meant to stay. They took all they spoils as well, and they spoils just meant they stuff. They got all their stuff as well, but they had to be willing to fight for it. They had to be willing to fight for it. And so we have to be ready. We have to be ready. You have to be ready to fight for what God has called you to inherit, to get, because it's not going to come easy. So it's like, as the word said, how bad do you want it? How bad do you want it? You got to want this thing. Because a lot of times we going around the same mountain every day. We doing the same thing over and over again. You know how sometimes you can do the same thing over and over again till you tired of it. I don't want to do this no more. But when you get tired, that's when you're going to change. That's when you're going to do something different. God didn't want us to just live a boring life. But he wanted us to inherit all the promises that he had for us. That's why Jesus said he came that you might have life and have life more abundantly. He wants us to have the abundant life. And abundant life is just meaning a full productive life. He wanted us to be able to produce. And we have in us the ability to produce. But as I said, we're going to have to work on our part. God is not going to just do everything. A lot of times we just waiting on God. We waiting on him. I was one of them. I'm waiting on God. I'm waiting on the situation to be right. And so I could do what he called me to do. And God kept saying, I want you to preach. And I'm thinking, where? Because of my situation. And so, now for years I have been a witness. I've been a witness, but I never thought of it as a ministry or nothing like that. But now what I realized is that God had been preparing me through that. But, I never was thinking I'm finna preach and do all this and that. No. I was just simply being a witness. A witness for him for at least about 12 years, just witnessing to people. But I knew in my heart from the beginning that God had told me I'm going to be a preacher. But, it's like, what does that even look like? And so, when God told me to step out and start this channel, I didn't feel ready. I didn't feel qualified. I'm thinking, wow, Lord, you really gonna put me out there? And I just remember when I made the first video, I'm telling y'all, I was ready to quit. But I knew I couldn't. Because I wanted to please God. And so I had to continue to press my way. And I'm telling you, ever since I have continued to press, God has pressed with me. Every week God has given me a message. I am amazed. Because I remember talking to my pastor, and my pastor, we would have 3 services a week. So that means he had 3 messages to preach each week. And I was like, ooh. You never really realize how hard something is because they make it seem easy until you start to try to do it. And I'm thinking it's taking a lot in me just to come up with one message. So I'm amazed at God is what he has done so far. People don't know how much this is a miracle. When I look at myself on the screen, it's a miracle. It's a miracle. And it's because I just decided to take take a step with God. Not really even knowing how I should do a thing or whatever, but I'm just doing it to my, it's according to my ability. I'm not trying to be like anybody else but Pam. So I don't care if you're not ready, you don't feel qualified, you don't feel like you talk good enough, because I always been a lot of times made fun of because of my accent, because I have that little country twang in my voice, but I don't give a care what people say. I don't care what nobody think, because it's for whoever God is sending this message to. Do what God is telling you to do. I don't care if you feel fear or whatever. I don't care if you feel like quitting, still do it. Still do it anyway, because you never know what the blessings that going to come forth from what you are doing. Because God never tells us to do anything for no reason. And so, I want to go to Matthew, the 8th chapter, and read the 19th and the 20th verse. Because this was talking about this particular scribe. He wanted to follow Jesus, but he didn't really know what that really meant to really follow him. The things that he would have to endure. And so Jesus began to tell him. And so in that 19th verse, it says, and a certain scribe came and said unto him, Master, I will follow thee wheresoever thou goest. And Jesus said unto him, the foxes have holes, and the birds of the air have nests, but the Son of Man have nowhere to lay his head. And so he was letting him know that this is not going to be an easy journey if you really want to follow me, because this is going to be a hard, and it's going to be a hard path, and a lot of times you're going to be uncomfortable, because he was not just in no certain place for a very long period of time. If you read about Jesus, he was consistently on the move doing the work of God. And the only time you will see him rest was when he was going off to pray, to intercede and spend time with his Father. And he was like this until he was taken away. He was taken away once he went through the crucifixion. But he was about his Father's business. And we also have to be about the Father's business as well. And so, I also want to read in 2 Timothy, the 6th chapter. Now, 2 Timothy, the 4th chapter, 6th and the 7th verse, because this is talking about Paul. Because, Paul, he was obedient to do whatever that Jesus had called him to do. And he suffered a lot of things. He went through a lot of things. But see, he was determined to please Jesus. And this is what he was able to say at the end. It says, in that 6th verse, it says, I am now ready to be offered, and the time of my departure is at hand. It says, I have fought a good fight. I have finished my course. I have kept the faith. And then also in 1 Timothy 6 and 12, this is when Paul was encouraging Timothy in his ministry. And he told Timothy to fight the good fight of faith, lay hold on eternal life, whereunto thou art also called, and profess a good profession among many witnesses. And so he was able to say in the end that he, like I said, he had done all that God had called him to do. And so I got to thinking about different people had that determination to get what they needed from Jesus, no matter what it cost them. And that's why I thought about the Syrophoenician woman. It talks about her in the Mark, the 7th chapter. I want to read that 24 through that 29th verse. Because she didn't care what Jesus, the negative things that she heard, she didn't become offended. She was determined to get her daughter healed at whatever cost. And the fact that she was not a Jew. And so I want to read Mark, the 7th chapter, the 24th through the 29th verse. And it says, and from thence he arose and went into the borders of Tyre and Sidon, and entered into a house, and would have no man know it, but he could not be hid. So he was actually trying to go in the house and by himself, maybe, to be apart from the people for a little while. But as the word said, he could not be hid. For a certain woman whose young daughter had an unclean spirit heard of him and fell at his feet. And the woman was a Greek, a Syrophoenician by nation, and she besought him that he would cast forth the devil out of her daughter. And this is what Jesus said. But this did not move this woman. But Jesus said unto her, let the children first be filled, for it is not meet to take the children's bread and to cast it unto dogs. And she answered and said unto him, yes, Lord, yet the dogs under the table eat of the children's crumbs. And he said unto her, for this saying, go thy way, the devil is gone out of thy daughter. So he healed her daughter at that very moment, because Jesus was impressed with her faith. And so we should never give up on something that we really want from God. I don't care if you don't see it yet. Keep pursuing him. Keep pursuing God, because he's moved by faith. And see, in Luke the 5th chapter, the 18th through the 20th verse, it talks about the man with the palsy, and how the man with the palsy, he got him some little friends with him. He couldn't walk, but he got some little friends with him, and they say, I'm gonna get my healing today. And so they tried to press into Jesus, because when the people found out that Jesus was healing and doing all kind of miracles, the crowds began to follow him. Big crowds of people. And so they were surrounding the house. There were so many people there that they couldn't even go through the door. And so they was determined. So what they did, they opened up the ceiling towel, and they let down that man right in the midst of Jesus. And because he seen their faith, he healed the man right there. But see, they was determined. And then I also thought about blind Bartimaeus sitting on the roadside. It never says how long he was sitting there begging, but he probably begged there all the time because he was blind. It probably was a way for him to get, maybe to help take care of himself. And so when he had heard about Jesus, that Jesus was healing. And so when he heard Jesus was coming his way, blind brother mine said, I'm finna get healed today. And so blind Bartimaeus began to cry loud. And the people began to tell him, be quiet. Be quiet. And people like that for real. When you begin to just speak aloud about God, what God want to do in your life or whatever, they try to quiet you sometimes by dismissing you, or telling you what you can't have, or it couldn't be for you. I heard one girl tell me when I told her that God had called me to preach, she said, but you so quiet though. And I'm thinking, what do that have to do with anything? Well, I'm just saying how people just try to dismiss you. But it was all right for her to be a minister, though. I've never been the type of person to tear down people. If you don't have nothing good to say, sometimes you should just be quiet. But what she said didn't bother me at all. It just let me know where she was at. Even though she thought she was mature. But for her just to tell me that, then it's like, okay. It ain't stopped me at all, because God uses all kinds of people. Loud, some people laid back, some people quiet. God uses all different types of personalities. So sometimes people try to put you in one group that everybody got to be the same. But that's just simply not true. And so, as I said, blind Bartimaeus began to cry louder, to the point where he got Jesus' attention. And that very day, he was healed. And so God is just saying through this message, continue to pursue. Continue to pursue. Until that thing that you want is manifest in your life. So be encouraged. Amen. Bye-bye for now.